1:15. That was a social.
I think so.
We were 30 minutes longer in the JCC. 30 minutes longer.
Not bad.
Yeah. All right. Good morning, Simeon. How are you?
Okay, good morning, Rob. I get your.
That's right.
Let me ask you: are you missing any people from the shiur this morning? You know, you got a couple of sinners out there. You don't know if they made it or not.
Baruch Hashem, Mike. Look around the table. Most people are here. Some people I think might have been away for Yom Tif or for Yom Kippur. We'll probably tune in or catch it later. But Baruch Hashem, no, this
Okay.
the shiur is going strong. So here we go. We're up to Reish Ayin Aleph. We just started a little bit last week. We read Sif Katan. We had Sif Aleph, and Sif Aleph didn't say much. I'll just read it again. That when you get home after davening, you should hurry to eat immediately. Now, you take a look and you notice that there's a Be'er Halacha that's the size of I don't know. I can't think of an analogy the day after Yom Kippur, but okay. And so the question is, let's all talk about. So let's read a little bit of it. In the middle, it does switch gears a little bit to discussing just generally the mitzvah of Kiddush. Let's discuss first this issue because it is actually an interesting one. It is apparently the Taz, who is a commentary on the side of the Shulchan Aruch here, who makes a comment that this means that what he's saying, what the Tur meant when the Tur originally sort of wrote this, is that when you come home from shul, you should start immediately. That means even right after Plag HaMincha. I'm actually going to grab the Shulchan Aruch here off the shelf. So this is Reish Ayin Aleph, and apparently it's the Taz who everybody is not upset at, but surprised maybe. Yeah, because the Taz here says Va'afilu kodem. He doesn't say a lot here. It says Va'afilu kodem shetechshach. You can eat right away, even if it's before dark. Umutar lechol b'Shabbos la'yadei kiddush zan. It's permissible to eat after making a kiddush that's before sundown. And this is actually a very common practice of ours in the summertime, that we make kiddush and we eat before the sun has set. Now, many of us, I think our meals probably are going into the nighttime, but when you go to a more northern area in the summertime, the time between Plag HaMincha and, Shkia is longer. That hour and a quarter of halachic time is a longer time. And so much so that, as I mentioned before, there are definitely, situations that are described where people will daven, they go home, and they eat, and it's still light out when they're done. So the Taz says, no big deal. Shabbat started, you're good. But now we're going to have a whole column of, well, if the Taz hadn't said it, I would never have said what the Taz said. So take a look here at the Be'er Halacha on the side. We'll read a little bit. Miyad. So he writes here. This was again. Chafetz Chaim wrote the Be'er Halacha too. Va'afilu kodem chashecha. That was I double checked the quote. That's an accurate quote, even if it's before dark. Kain kasav hataz. Va'azil l'shitase b'siman reish lamed hey sif katan gimel, and we follow his position in reish lamed hey, which is an earlier one when it comes to. The discussion over there, I think, is the discussion of Mariv. Okay. Aval, remember we talked about, you could daven Mariv after Plag HaMincha, according to Rabbi Yehuda. The Chachamim saying after Shkia and Rabbi Yehuda, and then you could follow either opinion. So, sort of a rare psak halacha moment where you can choose. Aval, afi masha kosav hamagen avram b'siman reish samach zayin, havestiv sham b'mishnah berurah sif katan vav. Yesh lahachmir. But if you're going to start your meal 30 minutes before the time for Shema, which is, that's when we have to say the Shema again if we said it earlier. So if you're 30 minutes prior to that time, generally the halacha is, not just in the context of Shabbos, generally the halacha is if you're 30 minutes prior to the Kriya Shema, you shouldn't begin a meal. Because just like many other situations, if there's a mitzvah that needs to be done very soon, a meal may potentially distract you from the obligation that's coming up, and you'll eat, and then you'll fall asleep. It's like, towards the beginning of brachos, there's a whole thing about this. You come home from work, and then you shouldn't wait to daven until after. You shouldn't like eat and then say, "Oh, I'll daven afterwards." Rather, you should come home. You should maybe you should learn a little bit. Then you should daven, learn, or whatever. It's learn, daven, whatever one of those two order, and then you'll eat afterwards because you're tired. You're gonna fall asleep. The same thing applies every day. It should apply on Friday night as well. By the way, dafka on Friday night. I don't know about you. I'm more tired on Friday night than the other days of the week. And so perhaps we should be stringent and during that time not say Kiddush and not start our meal if we're in that time zone. But that's not what the Taz is describing, by the way. Just in general, right? 30 minutes before a Tzeitzah Kochavim is already usually after sunset. Because according to many of the poskim, what the Shema you said in Shul was too early, so it didn't count. With Prat Lidan, the Denogin B'chol Yom Hispal Mariv Bismano. Now the Mishnah Berurah points out, especially according to us, where our custom was to say Mariv after Shkia and David Mincha after Plag. Like Moshe Kasav Hayada Ephraim Sham, as like Hayada Ephraim says, which would mean that if you're davening Mar right after Shkia, you're probably ending at a time and getting home probably in that window of the 30 minutes before that time for Shema, or possibly getting home in that time frame. So some are machmir to not say Kiddush during that time and rather wait, say the Shema at Sefer Kochavim, and then you proceed with Kiddush. This is just during that 30-minute with a half an hour window. The Yosef o Yidei Kiddush, Kol Shul Plag HaMincha Ulamala, as long as Kiddush was after Plag HaMincha, an hour and a quarter before sunset, you can go ahead and eat and drink and whatever you'd like to do. You can have your Shabbos meal. As we've said earlier, Kamavar B'Simin Reish Samach Zayin Sif Beis. When we call Makom, according to what the Magen Avram has, awakened, so he's brought up, lahakshos, that he's pointed out a difficulty. After it's dark and mincha after plag mincha, alma de los virlan Rabbi Yehuda. We don't follow Rabbi Yehuda's opinion about the timing about mariv. How in the world could you make a kiddush one time after plag mincha and then have your meal at that point? We don't generally follow that opinion. The answer to this question, which is that on Shabbos, there is an inyan of Tosefes Shabbos, by the way. We talked about that, an idea of adding from the weekday to the Shabbos. Okay. But he doesn't like this, lechatchila, I guess. He says, lechatchila yosef tov limnom, he said, prevent yourself from being in this situation. If you're a kind of person who davens mincha mariv, staggered around shkia, which is all we do here, by the way, then you should avoid bring in Shabbos a bit. Kiddush early, that he feels already is too much, right? If you're generally saying that nighttime, in my general sense, is after shkia, who are you to make kiddush now? Even though you can add Tosefes Shabbos, but who's to say that you can now have kiddush and fulfill the mitzvah of kiddush and the meal before it's really dark?
Is that the concern?
Yes.
It seems like the concern is that it would interfere with the time dependency of saying Shema when you have.
Well, that I think
sort of brings it up.
That I think he's trying to say everyone would agree with. Everyone would agree that if you're already at that point,
if you're within 30 minutes,
then it's no good, and you shouldn't. Then there's another halacha at play. But he's trying to say within the halacha of kiddush, he doesn't feel comfortable that you go home and say kiddush earlier than you would daven mariv on a regular night, because kiddush is supposed to be b'yom haShabbos. Just because I added time to Shabbos, Okay, that's very nice. I'm allowed to do Tosefet Shabbos, but when is the quote unquote real Shabbos? That's when I should make the Kiddush on the real Shabbos day. Once it's dark.
Well, if you're adding for Shabbos, what are you doing during that time period?
Davening. I don't know. You're davening. You're adding the time of refraining so that look, I'm stretching a terrace right now, for on behalf because this is not the minhag Yisrael. I don't even know that this is like a modern Orthodox kula, like I don't think that's like I don't sense that that's something that's happening here. So and yet he's not happy with this, and he actually goes on further about this actually in more great depth now. Yeah, Simeon, go ahead. I see you got your hand up.
Rob, whose day are you reading from now? Who is that?
The Be'er Halacha, the Mishnah Berurah, the Chafetz Chaim here, who was, not sure about this whole practice that.
Yes, but he is much later than Rav Yosef Cairo. And if you go back and you read what Rav Yosef Cairo said, look, he says, "K'sheyavo leveso," he could have said, "Tzarich lechol miyad," but he uses the word yimaher.
Yeah.
I think that this is not a make-believe Shabbos. If you start Shabbos early, that is Shabbos, and you observe everything that you do on Shabbos.
Oh, 100%.
I don't understand his disagreement with the Shulchan Aruch.
Take a look. We're going to keep reading here, Simeon, and you're going to see how he's going to interpret this. Because you're right. On the surface, this would seem that when you get home, you should eat right away. That sounds like whenever that is. So now, right. But look look at this, and you'll tell me if you like how they read this line. Look, the pshat is you should make Kiddush and eat right away. Don't delay. But take a look. This is you can't make this stuff up. Ready? Those divrei hataz haniskar la'el. And with regards to the taz that we mentioned before, the taz who said, "Come home right away, even if it's before dark, and do whatever you need to do." La'anius dati, says the Chafetz Chaim, in my humble opinion, lulei dvarav hayisi omer de'en kavanas tatur klav masha amar miyad lizdares davazeh. Had the Taz never said those words, I would have never suggested what the Taz said, says the Chafetz Chaim, because that's not what the Tur, in my opinion, meant when he said immediately when you get home. Rak sheba hatur lomar devihigia zvan chiyuv kiddush. What does it mean immediately? It means when the time for Kiddush is upon us, make the Kiddush immediately. And look what he says about the time for Kiddush. Dahainu achashu laila. Once it's nighttime. Yeah, she'az miskadesh hayom, because then the day is now holy, meaning by the sun it is holy. I may have made it holy on my own by adding from the weekday to the Shabbos, but when he says here, lechol miyad, when is miyad? When is immediately? After it becomes night, because then the day is holy on its own accord, not just because I declared it holy. This is how the Chafetz Chaim wants to interpret the Tur who wrote this originally before the Shulchan Aruch, and that's why he says mitzvah lasos davar zeh techef v'lo le'acher. Do it immediately once it's dark, and don't delay. The Lashon Zochrehu al Hayayin b'knisaso. Because when it says in the Gemara, you're supposed to Zochar Sel Shabbos means Zochrehu, to mention it. Mentioning the holiness of Shabbos, you're supposed to do it al wine. That's what the Gemara says. Zochrehu al Hayayin b'knisaso. When Shabbos enters, the Gemara says mashma, meaning, according to the Mishnah Berurah, Techef Tishemiskadesh Hayom, immediately when the day becomes holy, but day in of itself. Not because human beings made it holier earlier, but because the day itself became holy. When does the day become holy? When the sun sets.
No.
I mean, it's like if you look at him now, he's not having it right now. 1 second, Simeon. Hold the critique for a moment, though. I want to just lay it all on the table, and then you'll go to town, okay? V'chein mashma berashi psachim kuvav
If you can't start Shabbos early, I accept it. If you can start Shabbos early, I accept it. But you can't have half a Shabbos.
A critique heard and understood. By the way, don't worry. Inside, I'm having the same thing in my mind. Let's take a look here. But now he starts bringing proof. Mishnah Berurah Chavetz Chaim was a brilliant scholar. He doesn't make things up from nowhere. Look what he brings as a proof. He says, "V'chein mashma b'Rashi psachim kuvav ayin sham." Rashi seems to have this indication in Arve Psachim. Aval lo ba lomar shemitzvah lezarez atzmo lekadesh mishum shehu kibel me'atzmo alav haShabbos. But he just is not. He doesn't say that it's a mitzvah to lezarez, to hurry himself to get a kiddush, because he is accepting of himself upon himself Shabbos. So okay, whatever. Basically, however he reads the Rashi there, and I didn't look up the Gemara. The idea is that Rashi seems to have held this. If you read Rashi, you could read him this way. The Rashba, which the Taz even quotes, "Shekosav shemuter beoso hazman lekadesh umuter lechol achakach af mishetechach." What does he say? It's permissible in that time to make kiddush, and it's permissible to eat afterwards, even if it's dark. Af mishetechach. The proof that the Taz brought that you can make kiddush early, which was the Rashba, says, "Oh, even if it's dark," meaning implying, of course you can before. He says, "Lo matzina." I didn't see in the Rashba that it's a mitzvah to hurry yourself. Al osto hazman. It's like, oh, a b'di'evet. If I did kiddush, it's okay early after the fact. But is it ideal? It's not an ideal according to the Rashba. His reading of the Rashba. So he's trying to knock out all the proofs here of the Taz. And he says, I saw in the Prisha, the Prisha also thought that the Rashba wasn't a good proof that you can make Kiddush early. And then he says here, and the answer is though, but it seems that it's mutter to make Kiddush by the fact that it's permissible. It's a mitzvah to make it earlier because of the idea of Zachver al Hayar B'Knisaso, because of this principle of mentioning the holiness of Shabbos over the wine when Shabbos ends. Now, I'm just going to continue here before Simeon's holding it in. He's gonna okay. And now the Mishnah, all these attempted proofs, they're bad. They're bad. The Taz, I love the Taz, and if he had never said it, I would have never said what he said. And he says now, Viraya, my best proof. And now here's the problem, because the Mishnah Berurah does bring an excellent proof here. An excellent proof. Look what he says. It's from Brachos Chav Zayin Amud Beis. Whether you like this proof or you don't like the proof, it's a good. Whether you don't like, you're like, this halacha doesn't make sense, doesn't make sense. The proof that he brings is quite strong. And Brachos Chav Zayin Amud Beis, the Amrin Sham, the Rebbe Matzli Shal Shabbos, the Erev Shabbos. Very well known Gemara, because this is the idea that you can start Shabbos early. He davened the Shabbos daven, the Erev Shabbos, meaning it's not quite Shabbos yet by the sun, but he davened early. He took in Shabbos early. What did he do next? V'nichnas lamerchatz lahazia. He then went to the bathhouse to take a schwitz. Okay, this is important. The hein hodem shegozur al hazah. This is before the rabbis made a decree that you can't do that on Shabbos. So what that became a decree about going to the bathhouse and even going to the sauna, because of the balonim, the people who ran the bathhouses were saying, no, we warmed it up from before Shabbos. Don't worry, we didn't heat it up on Shabbos. And then the rabbis did an investigation and they caught them that the owners of the bathhouses were actually heating up the water on Shabbos. And so they said nobody can go to the bathhouse on Shabbos. This is where the problem with rechitza actually starts on Shabbos. Why can't I have rechitza on Shabbos with warm water? Warm water beforehand, because there was zera that warm it up on Shabbos, and they found that there were some people who were playing games. So anyways, he did this before this decree. V'yatzav v'shanal on Pirkin. Then he went and he learned a little bit. He learned Daf Yomi, whatever. He did a little learning. The Gemara says it still wasn't dark. Why are they talking about him learning? They were trying to prove that the davening was very early. There was time to go to the bathhouse. And he gave shir to the Talmidim. All the time that it was still not dark. What is not mentioned in the Gemara? He didn't make Kiddush. If it's a mitzvah to make Kiddush right away, why didn't he go right away before going to the bathhouse, before giving the shir? Why didn't he make Kiddush and eat? So obviously he didn't make Kiddush right away. There's no need to hurry unless the Zman Chiyuv has kicked in. When is the Zman Chiyuv? When it's dark. Then there's a Chiyuv that triggers. Not to say that if you do, that's very careful. I'm going to split hairs here. It's not to say that if you make Kiddush early, you didn't fulfill the mitzvah. It's just that there's no mitzvah to hurry at that point. Remember, the whole point of the Shulchan Aruch was, when you come home, yimaher le'echol miyad, get down to business. The Mishnah Berurah is saying, not so fast. I have a story here of Rebbe who didn't exactly hurry, and it was before nighttime, and the reason he didn't hurry was because it was before nighttime. And therefore, if you like in the winter, in the summertime where we daven early, you come home and there's still light out. There's no push. Yeah. You see these three lovely children running around. There's a fourth one. Sometimes when I get home in summer, we don't get down to business right away exactly at Kiddush. There's a lot that goes on before Kiddush happens. So, but there's no inyan of hurrying according to this approach. According to Taz, there's an inyan to hurry. Any time of the year, when you get home, it could be the sun is still out in the sky. I finished davening after Plag HaMincha with a quick minyan. Get down to business, get to the table, make it right away. There's a mitzvah to hurry. Here, saying there's no mitzvah to hurry. The mitzvah to hurry only kicks in when? When is it yad? After sunset. Sorry, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So, I would think based on the fact that he was able to do all those things, I would think he set the Shabbos before Plag. That's fine.
So,
there's so much time.
Well, Shabbos before Plag. Shabbos. There's no acceptance before Plag.
But you can't, like, unless you live somewhere in Norway, there's not that much time.
Again, we have to remember also they're it's not like us, even talk about the mikvah. People who, let's say, they go there and they go to. I'm using the mikvah as a stand-in for the bathhouse here. The bathhouse was probably all on everything was probably on the same block. So he davened, right? They davened before Plag. Never, they didn't have Kabbalah Shabbos. Their Marav was Marav. It was like a weekday Marav, right? I don't even know if they had the Bracha Me'in Sheva at that point, by the way. I don't think that came. It was just a regular Marav. They said Birchos Kriya Shema, Shmona Esrei. Did they even say Aleinu at that point? I'm not sure they said Aleinu at that point yet, right? So they literally it's Birchos Kriya Shema, Shema, Shmona Esrei, and they're going home. So davening is 15 minutes, 20 minutes if they had more kavanah. So, you still have an hour till the sun sets. So he went to take a 10-minute schwitz at the bathhouse down the street. And then he gave his 10-minute halacha shir, right? To all the Talmidim, everyone looks forward to the Friday night 10-minute halacha shir. And then he came home. It was still light out. We have to assume that, when we think of davening on Friday night, it's not so long, but it's not short. Because we say Kabbalah, we sing Kabbalah Shabbos, it's a whole to-do. We make a Kiddush in shul. Their davening was 15 minutes, right? It's not like it was for us.
And you can absolutely
No, Plag is the earliest because that's the only that's the earliest time you could ever claim that it's where you could accept that it's the next day, because that's the earliest time that you could potentially even daven Marav, according to Rebbe Yehuda. So, anyways, I don't want to go into too much more. He's more back and forth about this. But the argument here is about whether there is a need for, whether miyad applies to any time on Shabbos, or miyad is a word that applies only after it gets dark. It's not to say that if you make Kiddush earlier, it doesn't count. Every that you make Kiddush after you accept Shabbos, it works. The question is whether there is an urgency that is necessary to Zachreu alayayim b'knisaso. Right? When I'm making a Kiddush on the wine, as Shabbos enters, is the entering part when I make Shabbos, try to do this quickly, or when Shabbos enters on its own, meaning when the sun goes down. Damien, I would like to hear your rebuttal. Even very patient. Go ahead.
I'll tell you, Rob. It seems to me that what you're doing, or what you just read, says that irrespective of the fact that you decided to have Shabbos early, you can't go to a schwitz because your very presence there will cause the Eino Yehudi to throw an extra log on the fire.
So just to clarify, the issue I believe in the Gemara was that the Jewish bathhouse owners were the ones who were violating Shabbos, and so they made a decree across the board: no bathhouse, because the Jewish owners were making business. They were doing business on Shabbos. They were violating. Anyways, so sorry. Go ahead.
But that's not how I learned the original manifestation of the halacha in Maseches Shabbos with Hirsch Wolf. It seems to me like one of the things they talked about there was Chame Teveria.
Yes.
And you could do Chame Teveria, and if you go to the bathhouse, eventually you're going to get a bill from Mr. Silverstein for having been to his bathhouse. So and you're not over on Shabbos. This is really the Shabbos Goy issue that the Gemara talks about.
Right. I have to go back and look at that figure. I have to go back and look at this figure. But the idea for sure is a rabbinic decree. There's nothing wrong on a d'oraisa level that before Shabbos, if water is heated up, to be able to use that to take a bath or shower. Midrabanan, we don't allow it. We don't allow midrabanan.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah Sifkat on the Beis. Yeah. About this. I don't know that there is. I guess you have a lot on your side to say that you don't have to be. When you get home, the first thing you have to do is make Kiddush if it's not dark. And it's dark, by the way, in general. For sure when it's dark. 30 minutes is the halacha. That and actually the Mishnah Berurah is going to bring it up again now in the Mishnah Berurah part. That is the real halacha, by the way. That you should try to say Kriya Shema before you make. If it's already the time for Shema, you should say Shema before you do Kiddush.
We announced, just like
yeah.
Friday night.
It's an interesting. I should ask Rabbi Mercer why there is no opinion of that. You know, when I dive into my in-laws shul, the youngest of Woodmere, and certainly in the summer, but even in the winter, they often make an announcement. The rabbis will get up. Part of the announcements on Friday night, they'll say, this minion is here tomorrow at this time. Please remember to say, the 3 paragraphs of Kriya Shema tonight after whatever the time is. I don't know why we don't make that announcement on Friday night. Really on every night, by the way. It's really an obligation every night. We daven Ma'ariv too early here for the Shema to be sure that it counts. So I will say that I spoke to a colleague of mine who works in KJ. Okay, I don't know if you know Roy Feldman. So Roy Feldman, he told me many years ago that at KJ they bedafka don't make the announcement because they want to support really the conclusion of the first Tosfos in Barachos, which justifies how the Jewish people were saying Shema early. And in order to not be, cast doubts on Jews throughout history who said Shema at quite an early time, that they weren't following halacha, KJ, they bedafka say, no, that's your yotzei with that Shema. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't hold that way, by the way. The Shulchan Aruch, meaning, I appreciate the historical piece of that Jews, were saying Kriya Shema very early and not necessarily going back and repeating it. Rashi tried to say, well, the Kriya Shema al Hamita suffices, but the only problem is that that's only one paragraph. And it's a difficult Tosfos. I mean, I appreciate it. It's a historical one. It's very even we learned many years, actually a couple of years ago at this point. Shulchan Aruch says no. We go back and repeat it after it's for sure 3 stars out. So, anyways, I don't know if that comes from that history of not wanting to denigrate the generations that come before us. I don't know. I have to ask Ryan Morrison if there's a particular reason we don't make that announcement. Anyways, so Sif Katan Beis, excuse me, in the Mishnah Berurah, Miyad. Umikol Makom. Mehanachon Mikros Kriyas Shema Mikodem. Nevertheless, this goes back to the Kriyas Shema point. It is correct to really say Shema before in Mistapek B'Shem Beis HaKnesses Lo Kara Bizmana. I didn't say Kriyas Shema at the right time at Shul, if I'm not sure. Take a look at the earlier statement that we talked about. This question.
Mikoda means before you eat, or
yes, Mikoda, before you eat. Yes. Again, if it's during that time or right before that time, then you should hold till that time. Now, Koslav HaRambam, the Rambam writes, Perek Chavtes, chapter 29 in the Mishnah Torah of Hilchot Shabbat, from the page. Mitzvahs. I spared you from the Be'er Halacha, the full discussion. It's very fascinating, by the way, but it's really quite an arichos. Okay. Mitzvahs asay min haTorah lekadesh es yom haShabbos b'dvarim. Now these are the ABCs of the mitzvah of Kiddush. And by the way, having just gone through a Yom Kippur that was a Shabbos, okay. I'm sorry, none of you around the table were with me on JCC. I spoke about that. That was my Yizkor Drasha, was the unique nature of Shabbos, Yom Kippur being together, and how they are in complete contradiction. That you fulfill the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbos on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur tells me I can't eat and drink. Oneg Shabbos tells me I have to eat and drink to enjoy the Shabbos. Anyway, I spoke about that with my Drasha on Yom Kippur, about how we actually do fulfill the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbos even when we are forbidden to eat and drink. The mitzvah from the Torah is to make Kiddush with our words. With our words, that's how we fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush min haTorah. There's no wine. What's the proof text for the mitzvah of Kiddush from the Torah? From the 10 Commandments. Zachor et yom haShabbos likodsho. We should remember the Shabbos day to sanctify it. How do I do that? Kolomar, the tradition of the rabbis, Zochrehu zechiras shevach v'kiddush v'chulei. As if to say, you should mention it. A mentioning of the praise and the sanctity of this day. It's all with my words. Midivrei Sofrim, and from the words of the rabbis, that is a classic Rambam word for Midirabbanan. There's a whole paper written about when the Rambam says Midivrei Sofrim, what does he mean? He actually could mean a few different things. Here it's clear it's Midirabbanan. Shetehei zechira zo al kos shel yayin. This mentioning should be over a cup of wine. So Midirabbanan, we add in using a cup of wine. As I've said many other times, the wine enhances the moment. It adds splendor to the mitzvah and chashivus to the. Yeah, perfect. There you go. We said the same thing. Perfect, Simeon. Yeah, chashivus. And this is what Tosfos and Sukkah and Nazir says. The al hayayin who rak midirabbanan. The wine part of Kiddush is only midirabbanan. The cost of a magen Avram de Lefiza midoraisa bekiddush sheomer betfila sagi. That the Kiddush that you say in tefillah is enough. Midoraisa. This is really referring to a whole discussion, also, by the way. By the way, that's part of what the Be'er Halacha is about. The big part here. Is it enough if I have kavana, or if I don't have kavana? And during tefillah, if I don't have kavana to fulfill a mitzvah of Kiddush, can I fulfill a mitzvah if I don't have kavana for the mitzvah? That's a lot of this discussion, by the way. So here, anyways, midoraisa, if I said it in tefillah, that's enough. Which is why it was so important this week. Now, you all knew this, but I don't know if everybody else knew it. It was why it was so important that we said Vayachulu after Shemona Esrei this week, because we didn't say it in the Amidah. And so on Friday night, we said Vayachulu, And hopefully everyone is around the table here appreciated why we were saying Vayachulu. This was the week to say Vayachulu because there was not Vayachulu in the Amida. And that is how we mentioned Shabbos. Yes, we had some mentionings of Shabbos in the Amida. It's true. But this was a more choshev way to acknowledge the Shabbos. You read the psukim of the creation story on the seventh day. And that's fulfillment, at least on a Doraisa level. The Kro Ksiv Zachor Es Yom HaShabbos. The pasuk says, remember the Shabbos day, and I remembered it. I mentioned it. I'm good. Midoraisa. The Kiddush b'mkom seuda, and the principle of making Kiddush in the place where you will eat your meal, midirabanan. That is a rabbinic concept. To make the Kiddush where I eat, because you'll say, well, but when I say Kiddush where I'm davening, that's not the Malcham Seuda. That Malcham Seuda, according to this, is a rabbinic concept. Kemoshe Kostav Habeis Yosef Etzim Reish Samach Tes. That mean Torah, tefillah is enough. By the way, when we get to the siman about Kiddush b'makom seuda, I'll show you the Tosfos, it's the Arbe Psachim, which is the source for why do we have to do Kiddush b'makom seuda, and he actually quotes Sukim from Yeshayahu as the proof. The Karas ala Shabbos oneg. Right, some people say that during the Kiddush on Shabbos day before they do the Shamru, which is, but anything you bring from a Navi is not a proof midoraisa. Okay. Alkain im safek lo im kiddush im olo ein tzarich lachzor lekadesh just feka derabanan lekula. Now here's an interesting application of the principle. If I know that I know that I davened, but then I went home, for some reason, you probably drank too much, and you're like, did I make kiddush tonight or not? Because I'm not sure how you forget that part. I don't understand how this suffix comes up. You have a suffix. Did I say Kiddush? Did I not say Kiddush tonight? If you have a suffix, whether or not you said Kiddush, I don't know how you get to the suffix. You don't need to go back and say it again. Why? Because now it's only because I davened, and no, therefore it's only a sfeika derabanan, a sfeika derabanan lekula. Suffix derabanan, a doubt when it's rabbinic. I don't need to do it again, and I shouldn't because I shouldn't mention God's name perhaps in vain. Gam, he points out here, the katan shegiya lechinuch. If you have a child who's arrived at the age of education, not bar mitzvah, but they are already at they can understand certain principles about how a mitzvah works. My oldest guy over there is already at the point where he is higia lachino. Right? I can explain, and your daughter were in the same class. Right? I can explain a concept to them. They can understand the concept. Do they understand all the depths of everything? No, but they can understand it. He wants to claim here that my 9-year-old, and at that point, make Kiddush for me on Friday night because I came home from shul. I discharged my Torah level obligation. Therefore, what's left is all the rabbinic in nature. So even the child who's a higia l'chinuch could make the Kiddush, and it works for me. So this is very schwer. Okay, I'm just gonna see. Okay. Okay, Simeon's like good. He's like, no, it's not. The ulam, he says ulam yesh lefak make basdei harbek. He points this out that this statements by I guess this is who the Prima Godim. I'm not sure who even made. Who was it? Hold see the Derech HaChaim. Yeah, he says I don't like this. The hakaim ala ne'el simin samech siv dal the mitzvah strichos kavana. First of all, he has a few problems here. Number one, we said. Mitzvot strichos we paskin in the Hilchos Kriyashma mitzvot strichos kavana latzef ba'asiyas hamitzvah. When you're doing and it's an action, you have to have kavana that I'm doing a mitzvah. Right? When I do an action, I should have kavana that I'm doing a mitzvah right now. Mistama en mi derech ha'olam lechaben latzef mitzvahs aseh zochor batfila. It's really a good point. Who here, when they're saying Shmona Esrei on Friday night, or even saying Vayachul on Friday night, who really is having kavanah that I'm fulfilling a mitzvah of Kiddush right now? I'm not sure any of us are having that kavanah when we're saying it because the words are there and it's part of tefillah. We're having kavanah that it's part of tefillah, but not necessarily that I'm fulfilling the mitzvah of Kiddush. So first of all, he says I don't like this because you're playing with fire here. Mitzvah strichos kavanah, and who's saying that everyone's having kavanah when they're saying tefillah that they're kavanah for the mitzvah of Kiddush? Second, sorry, continuing. Kevan, how do I know they don't have kavanah? Kevan sheyesh lo b'yayin opas v'yochol lekadesh aleihen achar kach bevracha kadin. Furthermore, they might have kavanah that I'm dafka not fulfilling the mitzvah of kiddush right now because I want to do the mitzvah of kiddush with wine or bread in place if there's no wine. So I dafka want to have kiddush, with the wine, the real kiddush, the one I'm going to fulfill. So maybe I dafka opposite kavanah not to be fulfilling the mitzvah. Right. Okay, more likely I'm having no kavanah, right, for any of the mitzvahs here that are being discussed. Like I'm not thinking about kiddush at all. But even if I am, I'm thinking I want to do kiddush when I get home. But tov yoser sheyetze az hamitzvah sasei d'oraisa mi sheyetze ata yebelo kos below shalom kom sudas. Mitzvah here says better not to do the mitzvah right now. Better to do the mitzvah d'oraisa later with the wine at the Shabbos table than to do the mitzvah now during davening. When you have no wine and you have no makom suda. There are a few other reasons. There's other reasons to be very wary about a kid making kiddush. Okay, number one, first of all, who says all the adults? Who said all the adults are yotze? Just because they daven doesn't mean they actually do the mitzvah midoraisa. If you hold a mitzvah strichos kavana, because who's having kavana? Maybe not everyone was having kavana for the mitzvah of kiddush. Second, he says the commercial halacha. He talked about this in the Be'er halacha. Yedei kiddush al yedei katan v'afilu im yizoher hashomer lomar imo mila b'mila gam kein lachon limno mazeh. But I want to honor my kid. I want to make them feel good. So you make the kiddush, and I'm saying it word for word with them. They're saying it, I'm saying it with them, right? He doesn't like this either. Im lo shemunach lefanav gam kein paso yain be'esak kiddush, unless you're also holding the cup of wine. Don't be like, well, still. My 9-year-old will hold the wine, your grape juice. They'll make the kiddush. I'll make them feel really good about themselves. And I'm just saying it by myself to myself. So I tell all the words. At that point, that's not, once you're on the same level of obligation, you need to have the wine also. Who said that their mitzvah d'Rabbanan, they can discharge your mitzvah d'Rabbanan? Because honestly, a kid is not even in the parak of mitzvos, really. It's the whole question. Can they discharge anything? They're a minor. Their obligation is really is not existent. We fictitiously create an obligation for them is a matter of education, right? We teach them and to make brachos. We teach them to daven. We teach them to shake lulav and esrog. We teach them but their level of obligation is it's my obligation, midrabanan, to educate them. I'm not sure that they have any obligation. They are about. So he says here, I don't like this whole thing. Unless we're doing that, you say a kiddush, they say kiddush. I have wine, they have grape juice, and okay, everyone's saying kiddush at the same time. Okay, that's cute. Okay, so he says here now, the kid. Now he teaches. Now he throws in an extra fact, which is interesting. I never thought about, but I thought about it after he says it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's obvious. The kiddush shel Yom Tov, which we're going to have in the kiddush of Yom Tov, who midrabanan. That is all midrabanan. There is no mitzvah on Yom Tov of kiddush from the Torah. It is all rabbinic. Because the Zachar es Yom Tov l'kodsho, it says Zachar es Shabbos l'kodsho. And he says when we call Mokom, yesh l'kol din kiddush shel Shabbos. We treat it, all the halachos are the same on Yom Tov as Shabbos, even though the obligation level is only the Rabbanan to start with. The Im Yom Tov Chal Erev Shabbos. Yom Tov falls out on a Friday, like it does this year. The Ein Lo Ela Kos Echad, and you only have enough wine in the house for one cup, so I could choose Kiddush on the second night of Yom Tov. I realized, you only make Kiddush either the second night of Yom Tov this year from Sukkot, or I could hold my wine for Friday night. Thursday night or Friday night, but I only have enough for one. Okay? And I guess I'm not able to procure from a friend or neighbor. Otherwise, do that. But yeah, so I'm saying, let's say on the second night of Yom Tov, I realize, I only have enough either for tonight or for tomorrow night for Friday. Because I have Kiddush Friday night also, right? So I'm going to run into a problem now. So which Kiddush do I prefer? The Yom Tov Kiddush, which is now, or do I hold off the wine till later, for the next day? Yeah. Well, but they'll say you have exactly the minimum amount you can make Kiddush on. So manicho l'Shabbos shehu min haTorah u'b'Yom Tov yikadesh al mafas. Better to make Kiddush then at that point with challah on Yom Tov, and in the place where it says Borei Pegaf and just say Hamina Aretz, and then proceed with the bracha, then use the wine on Friday night because that's the mitzvah min Torah. Better to enhance the mitzvah min Torah than the mitzvah. Yes. Well, I superimposed here, and that's on me. I superimposed here that second day of Yom. Let's assume that it's Shavuos, for example, where you have in Israel it's only one day. It can be Friday. Shabbos could be just Shabbos. So I superimpose that here. Let's assume worst case scenario that it's the first day of Yom Tov, and that there's no steak at the Yom, and it's like it's Eretz Yisrael steak at the Yom. Okay, yeah. So that's Allah. Now, let's go to Sif Base. Yeah, this is where this is worth the price of admission today. Just this, okay? Yeah, I'm just gonna read words of the. No, talking about this is not right because the mitzvah is the way all I am the Knisasa that's Martha. When Shabbos is, I have to mention Shabbos with wine. The Knisasa is that key word. There's no Knisasa with Shabbos morning.
You sure you want to do this, Rav?
Oh, the next bit? Yeah, I'm going to read the words of the Shulchan Aruch. I am not going to superimpose any of my commentary, so lest I be accused of being quite a liberal. I'm just going to read the words of Maran of Yosef Karo. Here we go. Sif Beis. Noshim. You could turn back a page, by the way. They go back to where we were. Okay. Noshim chayos b'kiddush. Women are obligated to kiddush afal pishu mitzvah taseisha azman grama, even though it's a positive time-bound mitzvah. A rish mitzvah tasei hatliya b'zman. Positive mitzvah that dependent upon time. Mishum the itkash zochor lishamor, because there is a hekesh, a connection between zochor and shamor. Okay.
So it's a mitzvah lo saseh as well.
I'll keep going. So there's a connection between Zachor and Shamor. I'll regalachas here. You understand that the first time the Dibros appear in the Torah, it says Zachor es Yom HaShabbos L'Kacho. The second time it says Shamor es Yom HaShabbos L'Kacho. And the famous mitzvah also brought Lacha is Zachor v'Shamor Tibur Echanem. They said together. And because of that, that is going to be a key here. So there's a connection between these two. Therefore, women are obligated, even though it's a positive type of mitzvah, they are obligated. Mitzvah, let's say we're coming out of sukkah. Sukkah is a time-bound mitzvah. Women are not obligated in the mitzvah of sukkah. If they choose to engage in it, if they choose not to, they were not ever obligated to. And then the focus about this would be the bracha. The Sfaradim would say the woman should not make the bracha on a mitzvah as man grama. They do not say the bracha to do the mitzvah. So they want to hold lulav and esrog. I actually have to be careful about this in the school because we have a lot of Sfaradim in our school, Baruch Hashem. And so the girls who are Sfaradim, they should not make a bracha on lulav and esrog. Lulav and esrog is a time on mitzvah. The Ashkenazi Psak halacha, following Tosfos, is that women make bracha on mitzvah as man grama. Therefore, they can make a bracha on lulav and esrog. They can make leishei basukah. But for Sfaradi women, they do not make, but they can participate in the mitzvah. It's not a problem. Because why? I can't say Asher Kiddushan of a mitzvah sav v'tzivanu. They're not commanded. That's the position. I'm not saying it. I can't. How am I? I didn't get it. I didn't get it. A woman who's not obligated in this mitzvah. It also says it's the general command. There's a command, and just because I don't have to do it doesn't mean I'm not commanded in the general sense. Jewish people were commanded that I still relevant. This mitzvah is relevant to me, even if I'm not forced to do it, or obligated to do it. Anyways, so v'hani nashe oil v'isnaihu v'shira. Since these women are obligated, since they are relevant in the shmira, isnaihu v'zachira. They are relevant in the zachira of Shabbos because of the connection between these two. Now, again, I'm just translating. I'm not here to do anything more. Umotzios es ha'anashim. Women can be motzi men in kiddush. Hoel v'chayavos min haTorah kemosam, since they are obligated min haTorah, just like the men. Period. Okay. women can be motzi men in Kiddush on Friday nights. Okay, I translated. No one should accuse me of anything here. Okay, take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Okay, the Mishnah Berurah is going to be, you'll not be surprised, maybe be a little bit machmir about one of these issues. First, he's going to give the explanation about the halacha, which emerges from the Gemara. This is a sugya in brachos, okay, on daf chaf in Baseches brachos. This is not even the Shulchan Aruch being liberal, progressive. This is in the Gemara. You can't. That's why you can't deny the words of the Gemara. The Gemara says women can emote the man on Kiddush. Words of the Gemara. Now, take a look at Sifkot on Gimel. He gives a little color to this sugya of the Gemara, and then you'll see he gets a little bit mach. He's going to be a little mach, but not as you think. Okay, and we'll take a look at the Aruch HaShulchan. Okay, he says here, "There's Zachor as Yom HaShabbos Amur b'Dibros HaRishonos." That was stated in the first Dibros. Zachor. V'Shamor as Yom HaShabbos L'Kodsho Dibros HaChronos. The second time it appears, it says Shamor. Shneim b'Dibur Echad Nemru. And the tradition is that they were stated together at the same time. They were Zachor and Shamor. God said, Zachor and Shamor in some miraculous way at the same moment, right? Koi al shmira. Sorry, v'Zachor koi al mitzvah sasei de Kiddush. Zachor is interpreted as being the positive mitzvah of Kiddush, and Shamor is the shmira mimalacha, is the guarding from malacha, are the negative commandments of Shabbat. Ukashay is the malacha b'adai nashim mutaros, and just like with the prohibition of the prohibited labors, for sure women are obligated. What are you going to say? Women are not obligated in making a fire on Shabbos? That's ridiculous. Of course, women are obligated in negative. The mitzvah is both say in chiluk there's no differentiation when it comes to whether it's bound by time, whether it's not bound by time. So Cain, turn the page. But I say that Zachor gam nashim mitzuvos. So too, by positive, women are obligated in the mitzvah of Kiddush because of the hekesh, because of this Talmudic principle connecting Zachor and Shamor, because it was stated by a Kodesh Baruch Hu. So Kodesh Baruch Hu did this. It was at the same time. Therefore, it is a mitzvah for women, and there's no tour by the time-bound piece. Upashut dekoton motzi es ha'isha. It's obvious a minor cannot be motzi a woman. The lo asek rabbanon umapik the oraisa. How could the rabbanon chiyuv? And again, the rabbanon chiyuv for a kid is also shaky ground. I'm just saying it like it is. But certainly, there's no discussion to be had that a child can be motzi the woman because she has an obligation biblically. Now, what they're getting into here is the reality of the historical reality that women often were illiterate, and that there were sometimes children who were being educated and who were literate, particularly the boys. Okay, and that's why he writes here, "Afilu ben Yud Gimel Shana," and even if let's say he's 13 years old, he's bar mitzvah age. So you say, well, now he's going to orais the chiyuv. Well, Chayshin Hashem Elo Hevi Shtei Sa'aros. But there's perhaps a fear here that this child has probably 13 years. Really, the obligation is 13 years, but also signs of physical maturity, right? Right? And the v'mile de oraisa lo samchina chazaka. When it comes to things that are de oraisa, we don't rely on a chazaka of years. In this case, the mikeven shegia lechlal shanim higia lechlal simanei sa'aros. We're not going to assume just because they have come to a years that therefore they have come to us that can assure us about simanim of mature physical maturity. Ad sheyisalei kano. I got to start to see some of that little hair growing in, that the awkward teenage, mustache hair. Okay, come on, then I know you can make kiddush for me. Then I'm good, right? Kimo shekastu the choshen nishbatzim and lamed hey the lachein tikadesh ha'isha la'atzma. Therefore, a woman should make kiddush for herself. Well, that's very interesting because obviously this is a side point, and I don't want to go too skill on this one. The minhag very strong minhag. I don't think it's just in the our belt, in the more yeshivish belts also. The bar mitzvah boy gets up and he lanes and he does the whole shebang on his bar mitzvah day. Sometimes you're like, okay, this kid already has like a beard, right? And sometimes, oh, and yet we don't ever say, well, you're 3'3". I'm not comfortable with this situation. But it's interesting because tefillah is not something that the tefillah is not doraisa. It davens, let's say, from the Amadori at that point. Not the doraisa, right? You have the meat doraisa we're choshesh. When it comes to doraisas, we don't like to play around. But when it comes to Kriyas HaTorah, it's interesting. The obligation of Kriyas HaTorah on Shabbos morning may only be midrabanan, right? We might say that the Kiddush was, sorry, not Kiddush, the Kriyas HaTorah, the question is, there a individual obligation, is there a communal obligation? But I'm not sure that you could say that it's a Torah obligation to have Kriyas HaTorah every Shabbos. Point to me the pasuk, but that states that it's a mitzvah. So perhaps the reason, I'm just really speaking now off the cuff, perhaps the reason that we don't start questioning young bar mitzvah boys about their maturity, their physical maturity, all the things that they end up doing on their bar mitzvah are rabbanon in nature. But it would be interesting if the bar mitzvah boy, where could be a problem is if there's a Friday night meal and we said, the bar mitzvah boy, you make kiddush, which I've never seen happen, by the way. I've never seen that they insist on the bar mitzvah and they kiddush. But perhaps if that's the case, we should actually be choshesh if the bar mitzvah boy was the one who made kiddush, because that bar mitzvah mida right. Anyways, just a side point, was thinking about when I was going over this. So he says here, just to finish this fascinating topic, okay, because there's so much to say about it. So now let's say that the woman she doesn't know how to read. So for her and her 13-year-old or 12-year-old boy knows how to read. So she's in a bind. And the husband's not home for whatever reason. There's no husband around. If she doesn't know how to make kiddush on her own, she should say word for word with 12-year-old boy should make it, Baruch, and he's taking kiddush for himself, and she makes it for herself, but he's reading the words and she's just repeating. That's what she should do, because she can't be, have in mind not to have kavanah to fulfill kiddush from him. The ofen zeh kaven meretz hakiddush also, since she's not saying the kiddush on her own. Nochon she pas yayin munach gam lefoneh beis hakiddush. Should she have a wine or bread in front of her when she's taking the kiddush? And she shouldn't be relying on what the young boy has the wine or the challah in his grasp. Because she can't fulfill her mitzvah of kiddush through him. And this doesn't help. This helps even if he's a very young. We have a 7-year-old brilliant scholar, a little boy. 1 second here, I'll have you ask your question in a second. He's very young, but he knows the kiddush. Okay, help mom. Mom doesn't know the kiddush, so help mom out. And it's fascinating here is I'm talking about the only reason the woman will be doing this is because she doesn't know how to read. Otherwise, if she knows how to read, she could do it herself. And all this is if the woman hasn't davened. If she davened, maybe she memorized tefillah. Many people memorize tefillah. That's they knew tefillah. But we talked about maybe you're not if you don't have the kavanah. That's the whole question. At that point, it is fascinating because then I don't have to do a rice obligation anymore, and now my obligation is only rabbinic. And now you have a boy who's 13 years old. Maybe we question his physical maturity, but we said only machmir on mile de oraisa, right? And he is already a mitzvah boy, and his is only rabbinic now because the woman who davened marv and she had kavanah for the mitzvah of kiddush and the tefillah, right? Because now he can have kavanah to mimotzi her. He's and this is not a doraisa matter anymore. Kasav is safer. Rabba Shnei Anashim Imrotzim Lahotzi B'nei Beitam. You have two men who want to be motzi their household, so you're having two households in the same. One second, let me finish this comment, and then you'll ask a question. I actually know that you're going to ask a good question. Okay? If you have two men, two families there, they're eating together. You ever been there? You want to make kiddush for yourself? You want to make kiddush for yourself? Right? You always, you want to make kiddush for yourself? And that's fine. If they want to, they can. Actually, no reason to do that. But people always ask me, I'm eating at your house. Of course I trust that you're going to make kiddush. Like I'll be okay with your kiddush. But if, let's say, people insist to make their own kiddush, lo yikadshu ka'achas, they should not make it at the same time. My family is on this half of the table listening to me make the kiddush, and you're on the other side of the table, and your family is listening to you make your kiddush. Don't do it at the same time. To trade kali lo mishmai, because voice is so difficult to distinguish between them. There is some pushback here. I had in my extra comments that, and I'll talk about them in a second. The reason why I'm listening to people singing Kivanu Vacharta Ve'otanu Kidasha, and I can't distinguish. If I'm listening to my dad, right, and I'm only being yotzei through my dad, and you're being yotzei through your dad, right? I'm like, wait, I can't hear who's saying kiddush right now, right? And so therefore, take turns. You make kiddush first, I make kiddush second. Now, in my extra comments I have here, they do write. Omnam lekaman kosav sheyesh shenohagu sheshnayim mikachim yachad. It's a custom that people multiple make kiddush. Afilu kishemotziim es b'nei beisam, even when they're motzi their household. Kevan shah kiddush chaviv lahem, and the explanation for why the minhag is acceptable is because the mitzvah of kiddush is so beloved. Nostin alav da'atam v'shomim. They're concentrating to listen. That two people can read the Megillah at the same time, and it's okay because I'm going to pay close attention because I love the mitzvah of Megillah. Not recommended by. That's not whatever. But if you do it, it's fine. It's better not to do it by kiddush. But if there is a minhag to do it, if you're going to do it, better to do it, back to back or something like that. But if you do, but after the fact, it's fine. If you do it, it's fine. If that's your minhag, not to tell you to change your minhag. The interesting case he brings up here, and that never happens in my house at all, right, guys? You'll if this never happens. All my kids are here saying, what about making kiddush while a child is crying? Never happened, right, guys? No one ever cried at our table. Okay? So that's Rav Nissen Karlitz. Rav Nissen Karlitz says, there's no chisaron in two voices. You can't distinguish one from the other. The crying is not me'inyan hakiddush. You can get louder. When your kids cry, you just talk louder in order for you to. I know. Hakiddush, people just naturally get louder when this happens, he said, without even realizing it. They end up being louder, and no worry, everyone will hear you. Now, what this actually does in a serious matter, though, if you're going to be yotzei, sometimes on Friday night, kiddush made here in the shul, like a big crowd. Here you have to be careful, because what happens when they get to kivanu v'achar? Here's what sometimes can happen, and I'm telling you to be careful. The person who's making the kiddush, and you're being yotzei, start saying kivan, and everyone joins in. Kivanu v'acharta. Wait, I can't hear them. They're on the other end, middle of the room, and now everyone just overran the Kivanu V'acharta, and I didn't hear the actual bracha of Kiddush. So if you're going to do Kivanu V'acharta like that, it's actually important for the person to make Kiddush. You can trigger everybody. It's a fascinating question. I don't want to start, messing with it. If you're in the middle of listening to somebody else's bracha interrupt, that's why we say on Rosh Hashanah. I don't know if I'm working to make an announcement for. We don't say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo. Why not? Because if in the middle of a bracha you're being yotzei, you shouldn't interrupt it with your own talking. And not because you'll miss the word, but because the bracha should be heard from beginning to end without interruption. It's fascinating how it became a minhag of Kivan V'acharta. Because really, it's better to hear words. Now, if you're just around the table, just a family, and the one person is saying Kivan V'acharta, beautiful. And if you want to hum along, hey. that everybody sings is an interesting minhag. I'm not here to say don't minhag. Minhag is a minhag, but it's interesting. But certainly, if you can't hear the words, that's a problem. You have to stop. And that same thing, by the way, goes in a chuppah. People are sometimes very good about this, right? They some people they trigger them to say, and they don't know what I'm saying, and they go back. The reason you do that is because they want the words to be heard by everybody. Same thing with the kibbutz. I will say on Friday night when we Kiddush here in shul, I do not do that. I actually say I think kibbutz and I don't wait for everyone to be longer. Why? Because there it makes sense. No one else is being noted with the Kiddush except the child standing right next to me who can hear me, and it's not a problem. So do I sing it? What do you do? Oh, when they start singing it, I actually don't. I don't sing it. I actually don't sing it. I don't. No, in the shul I sing it. At home, right? I just say what? No, I don't sing it. Well, usually I don't sing it because of this. Halachic territory of people are singing during this, they're talking, and you're not supposed to roll. So, sorry for the all right, we'll stop here. Next week we're going to finish the topic. I was going to ask a question. We're going to finish the topic of women and Kiddush, because is it really okay for a woman, for the wife, to be the one who makes Kiddush? Certainly. The Mishnah Berurah is a little machmir, and we're going to see that the proof is not so much in the pudding. There's some proof, but it's not as in the pudding. And even the Mishnah Berurah is going to come and admit that the wife can make a Kiddush for her husband. He's just not going to be comfortable if she makes Kiddush when there are guests. That's what's going to happen here. So even the Mishnah Berurah is going to allow the Kiddush to be made by the wife. Yair, go ahead, ask the question. My son's waiting to ask me a question. Go ahead.